It's really terrific to have so many people online. As well as our Jobs Australia members, we may also have Marion Webley-Stokes from the Department of Education. They were pretty interested in what we've been doing in terms of talking about some quality issues. We've got a couple of presenters. Now, today it's really it's an opportunity to swap notes rather than to give you a lot of information from this end. So I hope you will take advantage of the opportunity later either to type in questions or if you can with your mic to ask questions. But before we start the webinar proper, I'm just going to hand over to Al Parmiter here to just go through a couple of tech things with you.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for logging on today. I just want to quickly go over a couple of the tools on your dialogue, your panel that you should see to the right of your screen. You have a virtual hand, which you can see there on the slide on your at the left of the slide there, which I encourage any of you to use if you have any questions. And just to get a confirmation that people can hear me, can I just get a couple of people to press that button now, and so we can tell that we're all loud and clear. If you're wondering where that button is, it's right here. So feel free to just give it a press now, and I'll put it down. Great. Thanks, Steve. I'm hoping it's the same for the rest of you as well. Below that, you'll see it looks like it's a microphone icon, and yours has a cross through it. We've got you all on mute just because at the start it's a bit problematic with background noise. As we go on, if you do raise your virtual hand, what we'll actually try to do is unmute you and get you to sort of give the question verbally rather than typing it in. It just makes it a bit interesting for everyone else. A bit more interesting, I'm sorry. There is a question or a chat panel that you see further below. Again, if you'd rather not be unmuted and you do have a question, feel free to type away there, and Janet will address the question when she can. The audio mode options are there. If you're finding it a bit difficult to hear, sometimes it's easier to use the telephone, so you can switch from your mic and speakers to telephone if needs be. When you select that, the instructions to join, which include the dialing number, the access code, and the audio pin will appear. Anyway, I think that's it for now. It sounds like you can all hear us pretty well, so I will hand it back to Janet and we'll continue on.
Okay, thanks, Al. And look, if you've got any questions or tech problems, just type them in. We will pick them up that way. So what we're going to cover today, first of all, we're going to get a Jobs Australia member who was in the pilot to have a bit of a talk about what that experience was like for his organisation. And the person who's doing that is Matt Smitten from Melbourne City Mission, and I'll introduce him in a moment. Then I'm going to do a little bit of an update on what we've heard from the department. That's really a recap of information that was released at the most recent All Industry Forum webinar on the 19th of March, but there's been a little bit of subsequent data which we got on Monday, so we're going to give you a little bit of an update on that. And then after that, we're going to have a bit of a chat from a Jobs Australia member who is currently working towards accreditation. And that's Michael Kraft from Access in Queensland. So just to frame this conversation today, and I'm assuming that most people online are familiar with the issues around quality accreditation for JSA. Over the last 2 or 3 years, the department, I'm sorry, we're getting a little bit of background noise, so I'm a little bit distracted. I will focus. Over the last 2 or 3 years, the department has made some very clear statements to the effect that quality accreditation will be very significant for anyone tendering for business as of July 2015. And if you go to the performance framework page on the secure site, on the provider portal, it says the QAF, Quality Assurance Framework, will underpin mandatory accreditation of all JSA providers from 1 July 2015. Now, That's the situation, and that's the framework that we've had in mind in the absence of anything in the form of a working paper or a discussion paper about the next services. So as of April 2014, we don't have any indication yet about how services from July 2015 will be purchased. Nevertheless, today's webinar is based on the assumption that the statements about the need for providers to be moving towards accreditation is still a sound one. So we're assuming that this is going to continue to be important for anyone tendering. That's the basis for our thinking at the moment. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Matt Smitten from Melbourne City Mission. Melbourne City Mission is not a big employment services provider and hasn't had JSA for a very long time. Very active in Melbourne, very high involvement with young people, city locations and inner urban locations, and they were pretty quick off the mark to get involved in the pilot and are now fully accredited against the QAF. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Janet's asked me to participate in the pilot today, I guess, as a provider that's achieved accreditation, and I guess I just wanted to share a few of our experiences as a result of going through the pilot. I guess I want to talk about the value of undertaking the pilot, some of the challenges around the pilot, and just some recommendations that through observations that we found throughout undertaking the pilot. So I guess overall, as Janet was saying, we're only a small provider and we're only new to the job services sector at Melbourne City Mission. So as soon as the pilot became available, we really put our hand up for it because we wanted to show that we were committed, but we also wanted to put in place practical procedures and policies that would help drive performance. So overall, we really valued the experience. Mostly it's helped improve our compliance requirements, and we had our last performance meeting with the department 2 weeks ago, and this was reflected from them as well, that we haven't had a lot of issues around quality assurance as we have had in the past. So ways in which that's helped us, undertaking our own internal audit processes for employment pathway plans, reverse marketing, file and desktop audits, as well as outcome audits as well. It's really helped develop some good processes and procedures from our staff around that area. It's also helped increase performance, and not in terms of not a huge increase in star ratings, but it's helped with, I guess, our early school leaver engagement, because we've been able to put strategies in place to get early school leavers engaged in activities more quickly. It identified the need for more work with Stream 4 clients, so we were able to introduce a psychologist to work on addressing barriers with the Stream 4 cohort. But we've also seen slight increases in the star ratings over the last 12 to 18 months at every milestone period, although not a lot. You can definitely see an increase, and we put that down to participating in the pilot. It's also helped us centralise processes and procedures, forms for documentary evidence and other tools, so they're all now stored in a central area. I guess we have a really obscure IT system, and having them all on an intranet which all of our staff can access has been useful. And it's also made us accountable in terms of record keeping. I mean, the D tells you that you need to record complaints and keep minutes and agendas of meetings and continuous improvement registers, etc. And I guess we do all of those things. We have meetings, we address complaints, we do make improvements to our service, but recording them obviously wasn't a strength in the beginning. But now, as we have accreditation, and to maintain accreditation moving forward, you need to be able to provide evidence of those types of things. So that's been really helpful in that area. What stands out for us throughout the process is the auditors we'd already engaged. Melbourne City Mission, prior to the pilot being advertised to providers, were actually going through accreditation at an organisational level. So we'd already engaged a auditor which went out to tender and had been selected through an interview process. So we already had a great relationship with our auditor prior to actually coming in and doing the audit on the JSA quality assurance principles. So as a result, the auditors were quite familiar with our organisation around governance and leadership and staffing, but we still had to go through that process even though we were accredited as an organisation. We still had to go through the process of being audited against those principles for the Job Services Australia pilot. The challenges, as Janet mentioned, we're in one ESA with 3 small sites. Obviously, financial restrictions made the project or the pilot a little bit challenging. You know, we didn't have a budget to recruit a project worker or a project coordinator to help deliver processes and develop procedures. So it was actually built into my role. So as the Manager for Employment, looking after 3 sites and 14 team members, plus the day-to-day work that we do, you know, on the front line, there was still all of the extra work around getting the pilot up and going and making sure we could put ourselves in a position to actually receive accreditation. So, you know, it meant a lot of overtime. It meant a lot of, you know, working nights and weekends and things like that. But I guess for us, it was worth it at the end of the day. Let me just see what else. Some of my recommendations of what to watch out for is there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and the principles, a lot of them are duplicated. So it's about finding ways in which you can be able to demonstrate evidence that you're actually covering these things off. So we found a lot of the things could be covered off in team meetings for a number of the principles, where you would have an OH&S agenda at every team meeting. As an organisation, we would bring our quality and risk department into our team meetings to cover off quality and risk issues. We would also bring our communication and fundraising team into our meetings as well, so that they were able to you know, speak to the team about what was happening at an organisational level as well as the program level in those areas. I would say don't just create tools or resources for the purpose of getting through an audit. At the end of the day, once you're certified, you still need to undergo regular surveillance audits. And if you're unable to provide evidence or have tools available which demonstrate that you're implementing a lot of the procedures and processes, then it's pointless. So it's really important to create tools which are going to have a benefit on performance and compliance at the end of the day. I guess one of the other challenging processes that we found is once you're accredited, it's the resources that need to go into maintaining the accreditation. I mean, every time, you know, we implement a continuous improvement strategy, it may mean that an internal procedure or process needs to be updated. It may mean that a form needs to be rejigged and distributed to the team. And again, because of budget constraints and financial constraints, we can't, I guess, resource coordinator, so that still becomes my responsibility to continue to maintain those types of processes and procedures and documentary evidence tools, etc. So that's about it from me, Janet, unless you have any
No,
questions.
that's terrific. Thanks, Matt. Matt, you might have said, and I missed it, but just can I ask, which standard did you go with?
The ISO 9001.
Okay, terrific. And look, that last point you made about designing this reports carefully is one that's come up in a number of different contexts, so we might touch on that again later. Now, I wonder if I can invite Michael or any other participants online today to either put their hand up and make a comment by mic or type in a comment. But I'll let you have a go first. Michael Kraft, was there anything you wanted to say at this point?
Hi, Matt. I suppose I'm interested in how long did the process take from when you first started the thinking about the accreditation to completion?
Yeah, it pretty much took the whole time, Michael. I think we nominated in October 2012, and a lot happens in our industry or in our business sector, and our audit process didn't take place till September, but it was really something that I jumped on straight away, and as I said, it was built into my existing role, so we really needed to jump onto it straight away, because there were weeks where I would work on it continuously, and there were periods of time where I couldn't work on it. So yeah, it was really a good 12 to 15-month commitment.
Okay, Michael, any more queries?
No, it's interesting. It's a fair investment in time.
Well, that's right, and that is something that we've been talking about, I think, over the last 2 or 3 months. That you look at it, I think you have to. It's a bit like building jobs. Add a percentage on whatever you first thought. Does anyone else amongst our participants online want to make a comment? I haven't got anyone indicating they want to speak by mic, but if you do want to type something in, please go ahead and do that. I'm going to move on though now, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an update from the department. The department, the section at the Department of Employment that's working on this is working on 3 elements at the moment, and they all feed into the process, so I think it's worth having a sense of what they're doing. They're still in the process of reviewing the pilot participant audit reports. They're continuing to develop the policy for the QAF, so effectively that's going to mean refining the principles and meshing them against the standards. And the evaluation team, which is from a section separate from the QAF team, is in the process, I think, of finalising the evaluation. So on those, in terms of reviewing pilot participant audit reports, as of the 19th of March, there were 14 pilot participants who'd met all requirements. 16 audit reports were still in various stages of assessment. 7 audit reports were due for assessment, and 11 organisations had withdrawn, by and large choosing to wait until the formal quality framework is announced. Now, I think that spread is interesting because it underlines the point that Michael was picking up on before, that this is a fairly complex process and it takes quite a while. It takes quite a while for the organisations, and the department has said that it has taken them quite a while once they get the audit reports in to assess those and understand them and examine them. Now, of course, this is a pilot, so we're all doing it for the first time. Nevertheless, I think it's just worth thinking about those numbers and thinking that this isn't something that people sail through. It does take time, and in your planning, take that into account. They hope to finalise the reports that were submitted at the end of December by the end of March. Now, I don't know whether that actually did finally pan out. It's still only early April. But again, it's an indication that even at the department's end, it's not been a quick process. This is a fairly ambitious and complex undertaking, I think, for everybody. Continuing to develop the policy for the QAF. As a result of the pilot and the evaluation, the departments looked at the 8 principles and tested them against 4 criteria: looking for duplication, checking to see that the principles remain current for current business and policy settings, how systematic they are in the sense that one set of ideas within one principle flows to the next and so on, and that they do genuinely address the issue of reducing red tape. As a result of that, the principles have been revised. So on the 19th of March, the 8 principles had been revised to 7, and the idea was introduced that 2 of the principles would be standard-centric and the other 5 would be deed-centric. I spoke to Meda Kalishka and Marion Webley-Stokes on Monday, and Meda said in that conversation that since that meeting in March, they've now moved to thinking that in fact 3 of the principles, and I'll put them up in a moment, that 3 of the principles may actually be able to be classed as standard-centric and the other as deed-centric. Now, that's quite significant because it reduces the amount of, I guess, reporting that the auditors have to do. The auditors still have to report on the standard-centric principles, but they only report once in the standard report. They don't need to cover that territory twice in the 2 documents, in the 2 reports. Apparently, and I'm speaking as someone who's outside this and hasn't had close contact with the details, when the 8 principles were examined, it was seen that there were a number of elements within each of the 8 principles which, if you took them out, you could have you could then have a couple, 2 or 3 principles that just referred fairly directly to the standard. So that's what they've done. They've looked at the original 8 and they've thought, okay, if we take out this little element and that little element and put them into another better position, we will have some that refer fairly directly to all 4 of the standards. And finally, evaluating the pilot. Well, the evaluation started pretty much early January from memory. It's consisted of surveys and focus groups. Some of those surveys were undertaken during the pilot and some post. There were surveys of CEOs, quality managers, staff of providers, departmental staff and auditors. So fairly broad, and I think the expectation is that the report will be due mid-April, but it's at the discretion of the department as to when that will be released and presumably how much. So we have to wait and see there. But I think that we'll see, hopefully we'll get to see the report before too long, and I imagine we're going to see some interesting things about the auditors and the relationship between providers and auditors. That's my guess, just from things that I've heard and listened to in conversations. Just before I go on, I do have a set of these, a PDF of these slides with some notes, and I will send them out to you at the end so you can have this detail then. So here are the revised principles. I'm just going to flick them. I'm not going to go through them, but these are the revised principles. Now you can see these on the provider portal. They were posted last Friday as a news item. So the first 3, governance, leadership and staff. Now my understanding is that the department is thinking about these as being the standard-centric principles. And then the others are participants, labour market, employers and community, operational effectiveness and continuous improvement. So there has been quite a bit of really careful thinking and assessment of what sits best where and how to refine this. And my sense from all of this, from the people on the providers on the provider reference group, is that this is a significant advance on the way the principles were defined before. And just finally, we were talking on Monday about what the department's sense was about the relationship between auditors and providers, because I think that's been for me something that I've wanted to say to members. How do you choose your auditor? How do you work best with your auditor? Because there were a number of issues that arose about the auditor's understanding of the employment services system last year. And for anyone who wants more detail on that, Jobs Australia did quite a big report on the pilot, which is on our website, and I'm happy to flick the link to anyone who wants it. Just give me a shout. So the advice from the department around that was that it really reinforces the point that Matt was making earlier, that when you create reports in the audit process, make sure you develop a report that you can work with. That is going to help you to demonstrate continuous improvement over time. And as someone on a previous webinar said, it's something that you can do repeatedly. Don't create something which is a one-off and then in future you have to report against something that you would only do on a one-off basis. So developing reports well, or good reports that you can use but that don't create unnecessary burdens for yourself, is a real design issue. I think it's very abstract to talk about it in those terms, but when you're doing it, I think that's something to look at carefully. A second point, there's a real need for high-level commitment from your top management. I mean, clearly this is a big job. It's going to put a lot of pressure on quality managers and senior staff. You need buy-in from the top. And the last one is the one that I mentioned before, the need to really engage with the auditors. And I would say, as an outsider listening to people talking about what's happened, you can't assume that the auditor is going to have the kind of close knowledge and commitment that you have to employment services, because you have to have it. The auditor at some point can walk away from it, but it's not like that for you. So know your auditors, be in close discussions with them. Don't assume they know more than you do about it, because chances are they don't. So I think that's pretty much it. Just one more. Yes. At the All Industry webinar a couple of weeks ago, NESA came online and they announced 2 workshops they're going to run. They're day-long workshops, and those are the topics: preparing for certification against an accepted standard, and conducting an internal audit against quality standards. These are day-long workshops. There's quite a bit of detail about them. However, I spoke to Max Croft at NESA about it, and he said they're going to hold off until early in the financial year before they run them, because some providers are a bit uncertain in the current, because of the uncertainty about purchasing for 2015. But just keep it in mind, and if you want to know more or are interested, just give Max Croft at NESA a call about those. So now, unless anyone's got questions for me, or if you do, just type them in the box, and I don't think I had anything that you can't catch in the PDF or ask later on. What I'd like to do now is ask Michael Kraft, who's Executive Manager at Access Community Services in Logan in Queensland, to come on and just have a talk about how this is progressing for them. I should say that Access is probably a relatively small JSA provider with a very, very strong program with working with migrants and refugees and people from culturally and linguistically different backgrounds. And it's terrific to have, I think, both these 2 particular perspectives, Matt's youth perspective and Michael's migrant refugee perspective. Michael, over to you.
thanks, Janet. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me. We've had some technology issues here, so I missed half of that presentation, Janet. No doubt you can hear me in later. Probably a little bit about access to begin the conversation and how we ended up where we are at the moment. So access is about 30 years young. We've had a strong background in employment and migrant and refugee settlement over that period of time. As Janet said, we are a relative newcomer to the federal government employment programs, but we have been delivering state-funded employment programs since year dot. So we've been around for quite some time in the employment space. We are a little bit different. As a JSA provider, we're Queensland's only migrant and refugee specialist JSA, but we are firmly embedded in a settlement agency. So the JSA is a small part of the business and one of the mechanisms that we actually use to assist our clients into settling in Australia. So for us, it's a very, very important part of what we do. One of the pleasures, I suppose, of being a member of Jobs Australia, and here's a gratuitous plug, is that we were able to watch the pilot roll out through the lens of Jobs Australia, and at that particular time in 2012, we probably weren't in a situation that we could have effectively taken part in the pilot. I just don't think we were in that space. We had our own issues that we needed to look after, so it didn't really suit us to be part of the project. To say that we haven't been aware of what's going on would be a lie. We have an informal quality framework. We have always had one in place because of the other contracts that we run. So we have some fairly significant settlement and support contracts with the Department of Immigration and the Department of Community. So we have a fairly good system, things like our intranet system and our IT, and we do have the luxury that we do get good communication between our finance people and our HR people, and so there's generally been a pretty good base to start with. One of the challenges for us, I suppose, was that which particular direction did we take when we needed to get into the quality framework. So we're now in a good space, we feel, to bring the JSA up to speed. So for us, we chose to have the ISO framework. It fits in with the whole of the organisation, and I have to say, one of the interesting things for us is, and probably one of the factors behind going for ISO, is that this is happening also through some of the other contracts as well. So our settlement contract for many years has had an informal quality framework process. Now they're going to go to a formal ISO process. So we have other drivers other than the JSA. One of the good things, though, is that the JSA contract is going to be leading the organisation to that space. So we're taking the approach of getting the corporate side of the organisation up to ISO speed, and then everything else in the JSA will be up to speed as well. So it's kind of good that we're sort of sitting on the outside watching all the QAF evolve, because regardless of what we do at the ISO, we're going to be able to reconfigure QAF to suit whatever standards that come through. The way we're going about it at the moment, we are lucky we're in a position where we have some resources to put into it. Matt, my heart goes out to you. I realise it would have been a very, very hard process. Luckily, we have an internal ISO person who's making sure that the organisation standards are being implemented and documented. We have already met with our auditor. In fact, that was probably the very first thing that we did. And luckily, the auditor we're working with has been part of the QAF pilot. So it's good that he's already been through that process and can advise us accordingly. Similarly, the consultant that we have appointed has had some experience working with employment service providers, bringing them up to speed. Thank goodness for that. Certainly makes our job a little bit easier. The timing is fairly optimistic, but we believe that we can do it. We're looking to get to the first audit by September. We don't think that's too big an ask because we've had sort of a soft quality framework as part of the way that we do our business anyway. We have a lot of our standards and qualities are quite good against the JSA. It has been noted on a number of occasions that our approach has been quite good. So it's not a huge step for us. All we're really doing is we're formalising what we have been doing, which is great for us. Myself and all of the organisation are quite pleased that we're going down this path. We feel right now that we are very well placed to make the best out of the QAF process. It really is just another exercise to strengthen the way that we do our business. We know that for the 2015 contract, we will have the ISO accreditation, but so know that that's not where it ends. There's a lot that we're already, as we're going through the processes, we're already finding areas that we will implement according to the deed, but we will be going back to revisit ourselves to refine that process once we get the initial accreditation. So we're keeping it fairly simple at this stage. We're doing what needs to be done and keeping our eye on the QAF as it changes. Things that we're watching out for. Well, the biggest one for us, I suppose, is the financial outlay. It is a very it's not a cheap process, I think, to get to this stage. We're comfortable we've got some really good people that we're working with, and we're comfortable that we can get our systems in place. But like all of these processes, when you start it up, it's not an initial process. The actual management of it we don't see as being a significant financial issue, but yeah, we are certainly watching that. We're starting to see already an improvement in the currency of the documents. The process just going through this in the short period we've been doing has started to pick up some points which we've been able to address quite early. So we're very happy about that. One of the big areas for us, and that particularly crosses over contracts. So what I mean by that is a lot of our settlement clients will end up being our employment clients. However, there's confidentiality issues around that when you're transferring clients from contract to contract. So it's brought up a lot of organisational confidentiality issues that we're dealing with and we're working through. Not major dramas, but it's allowing us to really think about that process in a bit more detail and make sure we're matching the contracts that we're actually delivering. We're starting to see some some good checklists come through, which for us is great. It means that our internal auditing process, we're able to track that. So I'm very keen with where that's going. So that's sort of broadly where our particular contract is heading. One of the things that we are going to be fairly enthusiastic in pursuing is, once we get our accreditation, going back, as I mentioned, and re-looking at those standards again and building upon it, because I think there's a lot that we do that we're not going to capture in the first round of accreditation. And they're the things that are outside of the contract, and they're just the mechanisms that we use to assist our clients. They're not part of the JSA contract, but we believe we can start to capture a lot of those processes in the work that we're doing, and that's going to obviously improve our outcomes. I think that's about it. It's an exciting journey for us, but yeah, I'm fairly confident that we're going to get there, and it will be a useful exercise for all of us. Over to you, Janet.
Michael, thank you very much. I found that extremely interesting, and you've given us some very specific information which has a real flavour of how your organisation, the particularities of your organisation, are influencing the way you do that. I hope that for our participants the sound was reasonably good. I'm sorry, we're in Melbourne and Michael's in Brisbane on a mobile, and we thought we'd iron out all these tech problems, but you might have got a somewhat muffled line. I hope that the sound was reasonably good. Matt, I wondered if you wanted to ask, make any comment on Michael's observations just now, and if anyone else online would either like to say something or type in a question to either Matt or Michael, this is your opportunity. So Matt, did you want to comment on anything that Michael's discussed?
Yeah, I think I agree with Michael in terms of just taking, taking each step at a time. Like, I mean, Michael was talking about, updating a form or creating a checklist, and, that was sort of the same method for us as well. We created something which we got working, which then helped to identify an add-on that we needed to, by creating another form or another link, or giving that, whatever that form was being used for, giving that to somebody as part of their role and making them accountable for it. And I think you do have to remain excited. I mean, when we were getting closer to the audit process, particularly around doing the self-audit, and Michael talked about some of the other processes that they have in place as an organisation, it really makes you realise that you're probably doing a lot of these things anyway, and it really made it apparent to me when I was going through and filling in the self-audit the type of documentary evidence that we had available, the type of processes that we had available. So yeah, I think it's good to remain excited about it as well.
Terrific, terrific. Is there anyone online who'd like to speak, or does anyone have any questions? So far I haven't had anyone typing things in, but I'm conscious that many of the people online will have been or will be embarking on this, so I hope that if you do have some questions, you'll take this opportunity while we've got Michael and Matt manacled to the webinar. So I'll just give you a moment, and but as I say, you can always give me a ring later on and I will send the slides. But do take this opportunity to type us a question if you have one.
If I can support what Matt just said, the interesting thing for us is that once we started to drill down into the requirements of the QAS, then we realised that we were already doing that as part of the organisation. So for us, it was just a very, very small step to actually formalise it. When I say small, it's still complex, but it's not a big mind shift. It's just a little step away from the way that we're currently doing it and formalising it. And I think it creates a lot more security for people too, because our staff will get more confident in using the process and be very, very clear about the processes that they are to use. So it starts to put a bit more respect on the capability of the ECs and the industry brokers, etc., because they're going to be clearer about how they're doing their work.
Okay, you talked about it being, in a sense, not exactly a formality, but in a line of activity that you've already been involved with. And you did say to me, Michael, that because of your various settlement work and contracts, there are a number of areas for your organisation for access where you are currently, or you will have to become accredited against a quality system. So this is one more of a batch of quality accreditation. And that's true for quite a number of our members, that they will have some existing quality accreditation or quality framework around their organisation. And for organisations that have disability services, of course, that have disability, the DSS standard, RTOs will have their standards, including an RTO's quality standard, I believe. But I think that there's going to be some variation there, and that in some cases, and yours might be one of them, where you have to have existing quality accreditation for other contracts. This is an extension, whereas there may well be organisations online today who aren't quite in that they don't quite have that level of need at this point. I don't know, it's a guess of mine, but I think it may reflect something about the nature of the work that you do. Matt, did you have any comment about that?
No, and I would probably agree, Janet. As you're aware, we're a large organisation, and we have like children's services. We need to keep on top of the standards there, disability services standards. We have, I guess, in our corporate services, probably a lot like Michael, we have a training or a learning and development division. So, when our staff are doing professional development, they control all the coordination of that and record the fact that the staff are doing that training. We have a lot of, quite a large HR team which look after things like performance development tracking, supervision tracking, things like that. So we've got those resources, in place. So I guess for smaller organisations that don't have those types of resources, it's just about recording. I mean, for example, when it talks about that the staff are doing professional development training, they just really want to see, okay, what training that they did and when they did it, sort of thing. They don't want to know the content or anything, but they just want to see that the organisation is continually developing their staff by putting them through professional development standards, performance development training. So, yeah, definitely.
Terrific. Okay. Now I've got a question from Pablo. Pablo's asking both Michael and Matt, in your experience, what are the more time-consuming activities during the accreditation process? Matt?
Yeah. For myself, like one of the things that our auditor was quite big on was, having, I know we have our job aids and things like that and our guidelines that are on the CSN website, but creating for our own practices around filing and things like that, creating processes and procedures, and in particular using flowcharts, which are more visual aids. So, yeah, okay, we were doing these things, but we didn't have those types of process charts and flowcharts and things like that in place. So, that was one of the biggest challenges for me. You don't kind of have an hour or two all the time to sit there and put those things together. Reading through the documentary evidence guidelines and reading through the other guidelines and making sure all your documentary evidence forms are up to date and have all the information that the department looked for. So they were probably the big challenges for me, because when I thought about it, we already had team meetings and we already had minutes and things like that in place. So that was able to then, be able to show that we are consulting stuff around certain issues. We are, OH&S is a big part of what we do. Yeah, so they would probably be the key things for us.
Terrific. Thanks.
Processes and procedures.
Great. Michael, do you want to, I'm conscious that you're in the process, but even so, did you have any comment in response to Pablo's question? Time consuming.
Sure. I think the big one for us, I mean, what's taken most of the time up until now is really just reading through the guidelines and then going through the organisational processes. And I was just looking the other day at 25 pages of dot points that really is just a matter of saying, well, do you have this? Where is it? And is that a standard, or does it sit under something else? So it's really been making sense of what it is that we're currently doing. I know the next big body of work that we're going to have is around the process charts, which takes that information and puts it into something that's more visual. For us, it is quite, particularly seeing we employ so many people from a non-English speaking background, a visual representation is really important. So looking, that I know is going to take some time, but I think we've got a couple of programs that we're using at the moment that are assisting us with that as well.
Okay.
We've got a very good mind mapping program which helps us think about that. But yeah, basically it's just going through the guidelines and putting that up against your own organisation.
Right, thanks Michael. Pablo, I hope that's been useful. I think we've had a thumbs up on that one. Now guys, everyone, we're just about at the end of our time. We haven't had a lot of questions for people online, but I think I certainly myself found Matt and Michael's comments quite particular and specific and very informative for me, and I hope that you found that too. As I said, I will send out a PDF of those slides, and there are some brief notes on the material that I gave you before. Do by all means give me a ring or flick me an email if you've got any questions. And I'd just like on your behalf to thank Matt and Michael very much for coming online and taking the trouble to think through this material and give us a really specific personal reflection on what it's been like for them. It is a big undertaking for organisations, and for senior staff who have to guide it through and stick with it over a period of months. It's a big ask, I think, and so I appreciate that generosity in sharing that information with us. Thanks everyone for coming on board, and do keep in touch. Bye for now.